Good morning. Hello. Welcome to this video where we're going to talk about how to gather and evaluate sources in a fairly quick way for research projects and whatnot, since that is something that we see students struggle with all the time. Would you agree?
I agree. For those of you who don't know, my name is Julia. I'm a librarian here at Blue Ridge Community College, and I work with instructors and students to help with this stuff. So Sam and I are going to have a talk today, so hopefully it's slightly more entertaining than the usual fare. So Sam, let's see, I'm going to talk first. I'm going to share my screen if this works and talk a little bit about the resources that we have in the library to get you started. Oh yeah, look at that. Okay. So this is the library website for those of y'all who have never been there. For those of you who have, gold stars for you. You can get there by going to the library, the menu on the main Blue Ridge page. Click Services and Support Library and Open Lab. You can also in the URL box do blueridge.edu/library. Goes to the same place, so great. So then once you're here, I recommend for the purposes of research and English class, go down to this LibGuide box, click on it, search using this ENG, or they are in alphabetical order. We're going to try English 111, or if you're 112, you can try 112. They are similar, but not the same. But today we're going to look at English 111's pages. So this morning we're going to be talking, we're kind of going to be loosely using this website as a structure for what we're going to be talking about. And this research cycle graphic is also really helpful for thinking about what you are going to be doing for the purposes of this project. And so y'all and Sam have already talked about developing your topic, but we are going to talk just briefly about things like what you already know. Sam, do you want to talk about the beginning stages?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you will probably have heard a lot of this, as Julia just said, in class, but when you're thinking about developing a topic, whether it's a topic where you need to incorporate research or not, you should think about what you know. Do I know enough to provide a perspective or an opinion that is informed, or is that something I need to supplement with outside research? But I think most importantly, and y'all have heard me probably say this a million times at this point, you should always be searching for a topic that you care about, that you have a passion for, either that you already know something about and have a strong perspective or point of view on, or one that you are genuinely curious about knowing more about, because those are the things that are going to help propel you through the process of writing the paper, particularly with the research process. If you don't care about your topic, it's going to be hard to want to pull sources and read and take notes and all the things you need to do. And on the other end, on the back end of it, if you don't care about your topic, it makes it that much harder to write something that anybody would care about reading. So that's always where I start when I'm trying to develop a topic. The other thing that I think is important, especially when you're incorporating research like we're going to talk about as we go through the steps, is not getting too pinned down on your specific thesis statement as it relates to your topic, because that can, and really probably in a lot of cases should, change as you go through your research. As you learn new things, your opinion, your perspective should generally change as a human being. I know that maybe we're taught that shouldn't be the case in this day and age, but trust me, it's true.
Awesome.
So now we've started thinking about our topic. Now Julie's going to talk, I think, a little bit about how to go about locating those resources and really what are some good places to start. So what are some good places to start?
A couple of things. Once you have picked your topic, you have an idea about what you want to do a paper about. I like to encourage folks to think about what you already know about the topic, because you are a human being who has had experiences, you have encountered ideas in your life, and you do know some stuff. So it's important to take a second and just stop and think about what you already know, because that will inform how you go about looking stuff up. So then I encourage folks to kind of fill in the gaps. We have a library resource that works really well too, and it is Credo Reference. So Credo Reference is a database. What I like to tell students is, like, back in the olden times, encyclopedias used to exist in print, and they took up like so much room in library shelves, in libraries. All of those reference sources that are encyclopedias that have short articles about a small topic, they all have been smushed and digitized and put into this Credo reference source. So we'll talk about Wikipedia in a minute, but it's like Wikipedia except from the library instead of just on the internet. So Credo is a really great place to search for a topic. Look, I'm just going to search one that's already up here that you need more information about. So I'm not an expert on homelessness, but this is what I want to talk about for my topic. And so it will give me ideas that I haven't already thought of. One of the things that's really cool about this is that you see there's like a general definition and a quick little encyclopedia article from the Encyclopedia of Housing. And then there's a list of other articles about homelessness specifically. And then the coolest part of Credo is this little mind mappy thing over here. And each of these connected topics is another article. So if you're interested in homelessness, like if your topic is homelessness, but you're mostly interested in how to get homeless folks housing, or let's say you wanted to be a social worker and you want to focus on, placing people in housing resources, then you could click this article and get information specifically about different types of housing. So this mind mappy thing is very helpful in the Credo reference database. I am going to talk a little bit about Wikipedia. I think Sam generally talks about it. We're on the same page about it. Wikipedia is a great source to use at this point in your research. It's another encyclopedia. It is, back in the olden days, anybody could edit Wikipedia, and that is still sort of true to some extent, but Wikipedia now has an editorial process where people who are experts, even if they're just like you and me sort of experts, can go through and edit the articles and make sure that the information in them is more relevant and more correct and accurate than previously in the olden times. But so this is still a good place to look up stuff at this point in your research. And I usually say, I'm looking up homelessness, I usually say to students, Wikipedia is fine to use to gather background information to fill in the gaps in your knowledge as you're beginning to figure out what topics and what keywords and all kinds of things that you're going to use in library databases. But Wikipedia is not something that you should cite in your paper. It should not be one of the 5 sources in your paper. And honestly, neither should the Credo articles. Encyclopedia level sources, if you are doing academic research, are generally, like if you use them in big fancy college, you will get bad grades. I don't know.
Well, they're usually just too generic, right, to give any good information. Most of the reason you're going to be using sources is to express a particular point of view, especially if it's an argumentative or persuasive research paper. And Wikipedia is not going to give you that sort of a perspective from which you can make your case from. Plus, some of the things about editing, even though they are better, make it a little less than credible or trustworthy. But yeah, it's a great place to start your research. Just don't think of it as an end game, i.e. one of your sources.
Got it. So the other thing that people like to point out is, I'm going to go ahead, look on the side, you can navigate, click right on that references link. And what this does is it takes you to the bibliography for the article. So the people who have done the work to write the article have cited their sources just like you will in your paper. And you can sometimes track down those sources. And these are credible sources, usually, that you can track down and get to the source of the information that the people writing the Wikipedia articles are about. So this can be a good place to look for sources that you could possibly use in your paper. Okay. What's next? Oh, okay. So this is when I get to talk about library resources. And now I'm going to go right back to sharing the screen if I can figure it out. Why is it giving me a countdown? Oh, okay. So back to the library page, back to our LibGuide. So we're at the LibGuide. We have used Credo reference. These are some direct links to some other databases. I'm not even talk about that. So the main idea about doing research. So you have thought about what you already know. You have filled in the gaps of your knowledge using Credo and Wikipedia. And now it's time to find your sources. Actually, I'm going to unshare because Sam is now talking about, we have a whole script. It's so great. Sam's going to talk about finding your sources first. So like there's a tendency that we notice that students occasionally, not saying that you would ever do this.
Yeah, not you guys, but other people.
Right. So a lot of times students will think that they have to start writing the paper first because they have lots of good ideas. And I'm sure you do have lots of good ideas. However, we are here to encourage you to find sources first because, actually, I'm just going to turn it over to Sam.
Well, I mean, the main reason is you're not, even as much as you may feel like you are, you're not an expert on your topic. You are still learning in the learning stages, and therefore to give you credibility in what you're saying, it's important that you have other people with fancy degrees or more time in the game to give their perspectives, and by using their perspectives, you give your writing credibility. It would be like, you know, somebody who's an actor, like a Tom Cruise, trying to write something about the opioid crisis. He's not credible, so he would need to rely on other people who have expertise. The same thing applies for you. So finding sources first is going to give you a good perspective on what's the right kind of way to go about arguing or just explaining your topic. And without those things, it's easier for the person reading your work to just dismiss what you're saying because you're like, you're not an expert. But when you rely on more expert opinions and perspectives, it gives what you're saying more credence, and I have to wrestle with the ideas instead of just dismissing the ideas because they came from you, who is merely a student. Another important thing I think about gathering information that I like to preach to my students is trying to get more sources than you need is absolutely critical. So like, for example, in my class, the research paper is 5 sources minimum. For me, if I were doing research for that assignment, I'm going to find at least 10 sources before I dig in and say I've got enough sources, because that way I don't have to really pour over each source as I'm finding them. I can kind of put that off for a second, but I know if I have found twice as many sources as I need, the chances are that I will have 5 good ones goes way up. And so I don't have to go through every source, like read it front to bottom right at this particular point, but I can feel fairly confident I have a lot of good sources. And then a quick way to do that as well is, as I'm looking at sources, rather than looking at the whole, reading the whole source top to bottom, I'll look at the title, make sure that the title is appropriate and saying something that seems relevant to my actual topic or my actual thesis. And I'm also going to skim, or really probably just go ahead and read the abstract, because that will tell me the point of view of the source as well. So those are some quick kind of down and dirty little things I think about as I'm starting to pull sources. And now I think Julie is going to give you a little bit more in depth on how to figure out whether the sources you're looking at are actually credible and are going to be useful sources to your project.
So, one of the things that is like the quickest way to make sure that your sources have more weight, are more credible, is to start with the library website. So now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen to the library website. So y'all may know, and you may not know, based on how much experience you have in a school library. Academic libraries, school libraries, public libraries too, to some extent. Our whole job is to collect information that has gone through an editorial process. So somebody else has read the paper, the article in a magazine or in a fancy academic journal or in the newspaper. Somebody else has read that and said, hey, this is a credible source. This has been fact-checked. The information in it is facts. It has gone through a process. So that said, the quickest way to find credible sources is to search in library resources. And I know it's a little bit harder than just going to the internet, and Sam's going to make a whole nother video about how to search the internet effectively, and maybe I'll help him with that too, because I'm actually really good at that too. But the number one way to find credible sources quickly for your research papers for school is to start in the library website. So the cool part is, now that we're here looking at it, and I've been scrolling up and down, and it probably is making your brain crazy. The cool part is that we have a search box that searches most of our main databases. So this will be sort of a Google-like experience, sort of an internet-like experience, if you choose to search in this summon search and search our online collections. So give me a sample topic, Sam. What are they going to be doing research on? Is it
I mean, yeah, they have a bunch of topics. I tell you what, electoral college.
good.
That's one that's appropriate for the year we're in.
So I'm going to search I'm just going to use the words electoral college. And I'm going to do this search, and it's going to be great. So you'll see here that I have 458,000 results. That's a lot, but
That might take an afternoon to go through. You probably don't want to do that.
Yeah, we're not going to look at all of them. When I search on the internet, let's see if it still counts how many websites I get. No, it doesn't, because the internet is weird now. So it used to be that up at the top, it would be like 5,000 billion mazillion websites. But as you all know, look, it's got at least 10 pages worth of like sources. So anyway, the internet brings you like a bazillion gazillion sources, but we're not even going to talk about the internet today. We're going to talk about this, search results. So the first thing I tell folks to do is, so when you do this first search, let me think if this is right. You can also find books in our library. If you click this library catalog business, then you will only find books in our library, and you'll see, look, a book, and you can go to the shelf and you can find that book. So should you prefer reading things in print and you would like to check out something in the library, we do have that option. When you unclick this box, you will still find potentially ebooks that we have. Click the full text online box, because that's going to make sure that everything that occurs in this list is something that you can get full access to. And then the other thing, if you're feeling really fancy, like you want to read a really academic article, this thing called peer review, remember I was talking about that editorial process? This peer review process is a whole nother process where this whole, like, they pay people, not very much money, but they pay people to other experts in the field. So if I was a professor in sociology, they would pay other professors in sociology to read my paper and say then that it was peer reviewed, if they agreed with my facts, if they agreed with my process, all that stuff. So if you're feeling really fancy and or your instructor requires you to, you can click this peer reviewed box, and then you will only get articles, journal articles, as you can see my little cursor doing, that have been peer reviewed. So that's extra fancy. And you'll see it went from 458,000 results to 13,000 results. Now, you're not going to read all 13,000 results.
Why not?
And that's fine. It would take forever, and it's dumb, and they're not all relevant. But it will still, especially in the first few pages, give you some relevant results that are worth looking at. But I'm going to unclick that box. The other ways that you can limit these search results are, as we talked about, there are different kinds of sources. If you want a newspaper article, something really brief about your topic that you want information about, you can click that. And then, like Sam said, you read the title. Is this relevant to what I want to know? I don't know. Look at these people want to end the Electoral College. These people also want to end the Electoral College. Look at these people also want to end the Electoral College. Oh, look, this one says it's racist. So there's lots of, in this case, it's a trend right now to want to end the Electoral College. And so that's what newspaper articles are writing about, because newspapers are published really frequently. A lot of the stuff will be recent. So that's what newspapers do. There's also journal articles, which for academic purposes, a lot of times this is what you will end up using for your research. As you see, those peer-reviewed journal articles still come up, even though I haven't checked that box, because just being a scholarly journal article, like peer-reviewed, counts as a scholarly journal article. But just having journal articles is less fancy than peer review, if that makes sense. So they still show up. These are, as you will see, maybe a little more general. This one is looks like an informative article exploring the effects of national and regional popular vote versus the Electoral College. This one's talking about ignoring the Electoral College. And this one is talking about how it influences campaigns and policy. So these are specific articles. It's not an encyclopedia article, but they may be helpful for you in your research depending on what you want to know about the Electoral College. Sam talks about how timeliness of articles is important. And on the side also, you can limit things by publication date. So if you just wanted information about what people are talking about with the Electoral College right now, or in the last 5 years, or in the last 3 years, or in the last 1 year, all of that will look different. But it's a good way to limit your results. Ooh, look, only 382 for in the last year.
I would like that, yeah.
Right.
Just remember that there are certain topics where timeliness matters, and there are other topics where timeliness of the articles is not as important. Like if you're writing a paper on Shakespeare, maybe limiting yourself to stuff written in the last 2 years wouldn't even bring you the best sources. You just have to kind of make those determinations based on what kind of topic you're using.
Okay, so this is what this all looks like in the library database. I'm going to click this. We've talked about, our main topic is how are we going to evaluate our sources quickly? How are you going to find articles that you kind of feel good that they might be relevant to your topic? You're not going to read them all now. You're just going through these lists and clicking these boxes to try and find things that make sense for your topic. So once you're in the search results thing and you find an article that the title looks interesting, you can click on it. And like Sam was saying, you can then access the abstract. And this gives you a summary of the article without having to read the whole thing. So let's say you have done your search. You've decided that this article is cool. You've read the abstract. And now you want to make sure you want to put this somewhere so that you don't lose it. You decided this might be a source that you want to use, but you're not going to read the whole thing right now. It's really important that you make sure that you can go back and find this. So there's a couple different ways to do that. You can download it to your computer. You can copy the URL and email it to yourself, or you can print it out, which is what old people do. I like to print things out.
Me too.
I recommend using this copy URL because here's the thing. When you copy this URL, I don't know if it shows you, it probably will up here. It is not going to send you back to the right place. You have to copy this URL. I think you can also maybe email this article to yourself. Yeah, that's actually really helpful. You can just straight up email it to yourself, and then it will occur in your inbox, and then you won't lose it. When you're ready to cite it, or if you want to go ahead and create your works cited page while you're doing your research, which is not the worst idea, you can just copy and paste this. Choose which format. MLA9, I think, is the newest, coolest thing. Anyway.
It is. It's not that different, though, luckily.
Choose your format, and then you can copy and paste that right into a page. And then guess what? Your works cited page will already be done, and you won't have to stress about it at midnight on Sunday when you're about to turn in your paper. All right. So those are the features of the library databases that are important for you to know about. And I'm just going to continue to encourage you when you search. I'm going to turn off the screen sharing. When you search in the library database, you're automatically ensured that the sources that you have will be credible. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to do some critical thinking by reading the title and the abstract to decide if the article is relevant or not. It doesn't mean that you don't have to pay attention to the date that it's written. But as a general rule, in a perfect world, you could probably get all 5 of your sources in library databases, and then you don't have to even sort through the 50,000 bazillion internet sites. It doesn't mean that you won't want to fill in important data from, let's say, a government website or something like that, but it is a good place to start, and it's easier and faster than trying to sort through stuff on the internet. I think that's all I have to say today. Sam's going to do another video about the website stuff and reading your articles deeply.
There you go.
Anything else you want to say?
I thank you for sharing your knowledge with everybody and for helping me make this video.
Oh, wait, I have to show you one more thing that's really, 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 really important. So let's say you are following our rules and being a great student and using the library resources, or even if you're not, you're writing your paper, you're freaking out, you're trying to turn things in, but you have questions. Maybe you're not freaking out, but you have questions. So at the bottom of the library webpage, so you'll see, look, here's the top. You scroll all the way to the bottom. This website, or I mean this little button here, Ask a Librarian, when it is yellow like this, which generally speaking, it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you click on this and you can ask a librarian a question. So if you are stuck and you need help finding sources, we won't make you use sources just from the library, but we will encourage you to. You can ask, you can say, hey, I need 3 more sources. Can you help me find sources? If you need help citing your sources, you can ask that question. If you found an article that you really loved and you didn't email it to yourself like I told you to, you can come here and say, help, this was what the article was about. This is a word that was in the title, and we can probably like 95% of the time help you find that article again. So this is really important. Ask Librarian chat is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even at 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. So
I'm not available at 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, neither
Keep
am
that
I.
in mind.
Neither am I. We pay people to do things. So yes, that's it. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Hold on a second. Thank